Friends, hello, this is Carter, and welcome to this episode of Making It Up, the show where we just talk about writing. So, if you're an aspiring writer, an established writer, if you're writing curious, I don't know, this might be the show for you. We just have a conversation. Usually it's about writing, but sometimes we go off on tangents. I'm super curious about a person's journey and not even how they just got to be a writer, but how did they become the person they are today? Um, and a fantastic example of that is today's episode. And I'll get to the guest in just a minute. Just a quick note, you might have heard me talking about my company, Unbound Writer, before. That's unboundwriter.com. It's a company where I offer one-on-one writing coaching services, not only from craft and style and voice, but the psychology of writing. I help a lot of writers who are just stuck in, they don't know what to do next. They don't know how to finish a book. They don't know how to establish a writing practice. What are the blocks that are there? And friends, I've been through all of those things. So I know a thing or two after 20 plus years of doing this about getting stuck and the psychology of writing. So if you're interested in talking to me about that kind of a thing and seeing if I can help not only with your manuscripts, but with any kind of blocks that you're having, you can go to unboundwriter.com. You can just schedule a free call with me right there on the website where we can just see if we're a good fit to work together. All right. So I want to get to today's guest. So today I talked to I.S. Berry. Her name is Alana, which I remember when I met her in Maryland this year. She's from that area. I had heard of her, but I was also struck by her name because my daughter's name is Ileana. So very close. Not the most common name in the world. So Alana Berry writes under I.S. Berry. I met her. I was intrigued by her. So I asked her to be on the podcast. Typically I'm booking 6-7 months out. So this was a little while ago. So it's always excited when somebody who you found interesting, you're like, oh yeah, I get to talk to them this week. This conversation did not disappoint. It surpassed my expectations. She was super interesting. If you're not familiar with I.S. Berry, her debut novel came out just, I think in 2024. It's called The Peacock and the Sparrow. It's a novel about a CIA spy. The relevancy here is that Alana herself was a CIA spy and operations and case officer for 6 years, serving in wartime Baghdad and elsewhere. But her travels throughout her whole life are fascinating, and we get into this is an example of an episode where we don't even get to her writing for quite some time because we're going through kind of her journey as a human and all those things that informed her writing ultimately, but are important to understand to give context to the work that she's produced for the public. So it's fascinating. It's fucking fascinating. Really interesting getting into her time, particularly her time in Baghdad, in the Green Zone, and how that affected her and how it inspired her to write a memoir, which she ultimately didn't publish, but it was therapeutic and cathartic for her to write, even though it begat multiple fights with the CIA over what she was allowed to write and what she wasn't allowed to write. So we get into that. But then her novel itself, which she ultimately, published, The Peacock and the Sparrow. This was her first book, her first work of fiction. Not only did it get her an agent, not only did it sell, but it went through the roof. It was one of these debuts that just hit both commercially and critically. It won pretty much every award that you can win in kind of this genre, as well as making not only best of the year books in terms of lists, but actually the best book of the year for a number of different lists. So, you have this debut novelist who all of a sudden has this sudden commercial and critical success. And then we talked a bit about, okay, how do you follow that up, which is always a pervasive, pervasive concern for debuts who have had that. But she's exceptionally humble, exceptionally knowledgeable. And we had a great fucking conversation, man. You're going to love this one. This is my conversation with I.S. Berry.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, no, this will be fun. I'm just trying to think. So we basically met or connected in Gaithersburg, right? At
Correct.
yeah, yeah.
Gaithersburg Book Festival.
And it's funny between having gone to that and just seeing posts from people like you, there's quite the community there. I'm good friends with Alex Finlay,
Yeah.
and we're potentially hosting a retreat next year
Okay.
together. We debuted together in 2012. But then, you go to these cities and you realize there's just these pods of all these people you know.
Yeah.
I was just on stage with Angie Kim
Yep.
2 weeks ago here in Colorado. And I'm like, oh, you all know. And I'm talking to Chris Pavone on this podcast next week.
Yes.
It's
I know.
crazy.
In fact, he was at the Gaithersburg Book Festival, as I
Yeah, I
recall.
met him briefly there, and I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you should be on the show too. So I don't really know him, but I
Yeah.
just kind of met him there. So has that been kind of nice for you too? Because I know, um, yeah, I think you just have the one book out at this point, right?
Correct. Yes.
So you've entrenched in this community, which is so
Yeah.
important.
Oh, it's great. I mean, it's been the best, honestly, the best part of the journey is the writing community. It sounds
Yeah,
cliched, but it's true.
yeah,
I think DC has a really robust and close-knit community too.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
KT Wynn, shout out to my girl, KT.
Yeah, yeah. No, I've gotten to know her. Our books are almost titled the exact same
They
thing.
are, I know.
So we have that kind of weird bond going on.
Right.
Yeah, but
Um,
I feel like there are these pockets like Maryland, DC, certainly, kind of Connecticut area,
uh-huh.
Minnesota, Minneapolis. There's a real pod of thriller writers there.
It's so true. And I have to say, I mean, I don't know about you. Wait, do I remember correctly that you're a lawyer as well? Wait, no.
No, my
Oh,
daughter is in
your
law school.
daughter. That's what it was. Okay.
Yeah,
I knew
yeah,
there was a law connection somewhere in
yeah.
there. Okay. Well, I was just going to say my other two professions, I was a spy and I'm a lawyer. And they are not like close-knit professions. They're
Yeah,
not professions where people champion each other and lift each other up necessarily.
right, right.
Flying was quite the opposite. So this has like been such a refreshing change to me in midlife to just enter this world where, I mean, I don't know about you, but like your other careers, but I've never experienced anything like this.
Yeah, it's funny. I had been in the corporate world for decades in a very, I come from a hospitality background. So hospitality,
Okay.
real estate, a lot of data. Actually, now we do a lot of, I have a small company with a business partner. We do communication coaching, public speaking training, stuff like that. But I've been with pretty friendly small companies for a long time. But to your point, I remember in my 20s going from a really shitty company, mostly shitty boss, to a nice company and just not trusting it. Like not feel
Yeah,
like, okay, why are you so nice? What's your ulterior motive? And I don't know
right.
if you kind of feel that way, almost like with writer. When am I going to get
Oh,
backstabbed by my writer friends?
no, I mean, I haven't experienced that in the writer community. What's funny, like remember distinctly, so at the farm, which is the CIA's training course,
Yeah.
you don't know anyone's last name. And that's because, well, it's a variety of reasons. It's the obvious reason that they don't want you to compromise.
Right.
They're afraid it happened after Alter James and they were afraid
Okay.
there's gonna be another Alter James. But my point is that you go into this community like feeling totally distrustful, like they don't even trust you enough to know each other's last
Right.
name.
Well, you're trained to be distrustful, I assume.
You are,
Yeah.
and the CIA has been burned, but
Yeah.
yeah.
So I've got a lot to talk to you about. Which probably a lot of the obvious questions that you've been asked before. But I always see, I've done over 200 of these, and it's so interesting
God.
talking to authors and seeing or looking for that through line from youth to novelist.
Yeah.
And almost always there are these massive diversions along the way, but that novelist always ultimately comes out,
Yeah.
kicking and screaming. You clearly doesn't feel like you studied to go into the creative arts.
No. No.
What was your educational background?
Yeah, I was a poli sci and econ major.
Okay.
I think my passion was always foreign affairs and
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah.
I definitely always wanted to be a writer. I mean, I have like journals traveling around Europe where I remember writing, if I could have any job, I would be a writer. And I wrote voluminously in my spare time. I
Just for
have
yourself.
just for myself. I
Yeah.
have like stacks of failed novels. I went to Prague after college. That was like the left bank of the 90s,
Right. Right.
and everyone was an aspiring artist or
Right.
novelist.
Got your Kafka fix and
Exactly. And like drinking absinthe and living off your parents' money. And
so but what I'm curious just what was the foreign affairs kind of desire because that's very specific and to have a specific desire like that, as whatever 18, 19,
yeah.
20 year old is fairly interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think I studied abroad junior year at London School of Economics, and that just opened my world for
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah.
this was in the 90s, and the Balkans were the big issue, and it was
Sure.
post-communism. It was transition, Europe was transitioning.
Freshly post communism. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. And I had taught English in Poland for a summer, and I was fascinated by that world. I think we both grew up in the Cold War,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. 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 I was a teenager in the 80s. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So that shaped me, and I was fascinated by that world. I taught English in Poland, lived in Prague, um, and I fell in love with the world beyond.
Yeah.
And
Prague is not hard to fall in love with.
no, but what's interesting, it was right after I graduated college, 98. And it was very much in transition. I mean,
Yeah.
it was pretty bleak. It wasn't the Prague that maybe, people know now. Like
Right.
there weren't restaurants.
Right. It
You
was still opening up to the West.
For sure.
I mean, I was probably there in 92
Oh,
and
so you were still, I mean,
it was exceptionally cheap, but it was
oh,
also just
for
like,
sure.
it was a different world to try to navigate. I mean, I was there for whatever, 3 or 4 days I was backpacking.
Right. No, I mean, my rent was $300 a month, which
Yeah.
was actually on the high side back
Yeah.
then. But it was such an exciting time to be there. Václav Havel was the president,
Yeah. Yeah.
who was iconic.
Yeah.
He's
Very, very popular. Yep.
one of my heroes. And fun fact, I actually lived in the flat belonging to Jan Neruda, who was a famous Czech writer,
Hmm.
from whom Pablo Neruda, the Chilean poet, took his name.
Oh, oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah. And no one knows Jan Neruda outside of the Czech Republic, but
Yeah.
he's pretty iconic within the Czech
Yeah.
Republic. And I
Interesting.
lived in his flat. It was an attic in Malastrana, which is the new town, which was not so new. And I thought it was this cute little historic attic, and I thought, oh my God, I'm living in Jan Neruda's home. I'm going to be a writer. It's going to happen, and it didn't happen. I was sitting there every
But
night.
that seed was there, obviously like you said, you journaled quite a bit. You
I did.
obviously loved language. And I think also when you travel extensively globally, there's something about an appreciation for language that I think magnifies. And for me, it's also just the humbling of not being able to have command in a secondary language
Yeah.
like I would in English. But I think that also heightens your appreciation of language in your native tongue, for me at least.
That's true. I hadn't thought of that, but I think that's true. The other thing I think about traveling, what I noticed is because I was a student at London School of Economics, and then I had like no salary, working for this startup in Prague. I worked for a newspaper, an internet startup, and so I had like a shoestring budget when I was traveling around Europe. And I traveled everywhere. I traveled cheaply. I was on trains. I stayed in youth hostels. I had 20 girls in a room. I actually lived my first my first flat in Prague was above a nightclub called the Roxy. It was seedy. People would come and vomit on the floor at night.
Hmm.
But I felt like what I gained was you see these connections across places.
Yeah.
In art, in people, in literature. I mean, there's this sort of transcendence that I don't know that and just interest and contrast too
Yeah.
um, that I feel like I only got from traveling.
Yeah. And I think, because I traveled not as extensively as you, but I love to travel. Um, there's something also that because you are part of the unfamiliar, you're forced to pay attention, unlike how you were moving about in your native country.
True.
You become desensitized. So I mean, just even observationally walking down the street, you're like, oh,
100%.
that's different. And it's exhausting, but it's also, I think it hones those skills. And I think that clearly, I'm sure that helped with you working at the CIA, but as a writer, it allows you to observe those strange little things that might not seem strange to somebody who's there all the time.
100%. I think that's true. I also think that when you're a foreigner, you have to learn the basics. Like you have to learn the nuts and bolts, like how to take a subway, for
Right,
example,
right.
how to navigate, the way restaurant works or the food they eat, and I think those are the things that writers look for.
Yeah, I think that's true. So what came next? Was it working for the CIA or was it going to law school?
Well, a little both. Law school. I applied for the CIA, so so I lived in Prague, worked for this internet startup newspaper. Then it was too bohemian for me,
Yeah, yeah.
and
You got sick of the vomit on the floor and
I did, and I was not producing anything, any
yeah.
books or anything. So I worked as an intelligence analyst in Cambridge, England, for the U.S. Department of Defense for 2 years. I moved from Prague to Cambridge, and I was
Like
a
that that opportunity just came up and you're like, sure, I'll do that.
yeah. I mean, kind of a long story. I had worked
Yeah.
for the Office of Naval Intelligence right after college, and
Oh, okay. So you
yeah,
had some kind of connection to that
had a
world.
connection. And this was a different world. Like it was a much cozier world. It was kind of just you make a phone call
Yeah.
and you're on the next plane. And so, yeah, so I was a Balkans intelligence analyst, moved to Cambridge,
Oh.
England. I still remember walking into the embassy in Prague and, I had my travel orders and they arranged all my goods to be moved to Cambridge. And the person I was talking to might have been a CIA officer for all I knew. I didn't know
Yeah.
anything about the CIA back then. And who knows, maybe the internet startup I worked for was a CIA front. I like to think
Right, right,
it was.
right.
Um, so I moved to Cambridge, England. I was a Balkans intelligence analyst. I would go back and forth to Bosnia and Croatia, and it was still very much in
Wow.
transition.
In the 90s. Yeah, that's
90s, 1995 was when the Dayton Accords were signed. So it was very much, it was a tense situation.
yeah.
It was a fragile peace. There were three different ethnic groups that really were still on the precipice of war in
Yeah,
the US.
that hatred doesn't just go away because a peace agreement
No,
is signed.
it's still there, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a little more stable now, but there's basically a tripartite government in place.
Huh.
But we still had peacekeepers there. The U.S. military was still supporting them. I was helping to support them. I was an analyst.
Okay.
Loved the work, loved it. Loved being immersed in foreign affairs. Loved writing about foreign affairs. Loved having an impact on policy. Applied to the CIA because that seemed like the next logical step. And it was a way of kind of being in the trenches, living overseas. There aren't a lot of positions overseas working for the US government. But it took two plus years for the application at that time to go through. It was a glacial pace. I know, I don't think it's changed all that much. So went to law school in the meantime. I had deferred my entry, went to law
In
school.
the UK.
No, at the University of Virginia.
Okay.
Yep. So came back to the U.S., went to law school for 3 years, but mostly studied like international law, national security law. Um,
And I'm curious with because that's not obviously a small decision, knowing
yeah,
from the parent of somebody who's in law school now. Was your thinking, clearly you were on kind of a career track, but you were thinking like you wanted to be a lawyer, or that this having a law degree is going to fortify my ability to keep moving up the ladder within this kind of ecosystem I'm already in?
Honestly, I feel like my biggest reason for going to law school was for its own sake. I
Huh.
just think I thought law school, I loved law school. I thought it helped me think critically.
That's probably the least common answer, by the way.
For sure, the least common answer. Does your daughter want to practice law? I assume she does.
Yeah, the original desire was I want to hunt serial killers, but I don't want to carry a gun.
Oh,
So it
there
was
you
kind of
go.
prosecution, and then you get into that, and it's funny. She's going to be transfixed because she does my editing for this show,
Okay.
so she'll be the first to listen to this,
Cool.
so she'll love you. But you start going to your first year, and you're like, you see what's disillusioning, what's more
Yes.
attractive. And so she's, it's kind of in that I'm not 100% sure yet.
That's yeah, and you have time to figure it
I
out.
mean, she knows she doesn't want to go into like corporate law.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I didn't either. That was
Yeah.
low on my list. Yeah, no, I mean, I loved law school. I mean, I think like what was it, John McCain, who said that he loved the Naval Academy, but he didn't really like the Navy. I think so. I think I'm
Hmm.
sort of like that in the sense that I loved law school. I don't think I loved practicing law, which I did a little bit later.
Yeah.
Um, but I also, as I said, I mostly took international law and national security law
Yeah.
classes, which were my passion, and it was almost like getting a master's in national in international relations.
Yeah. I mean, this is like on track for, UN, World Bank, whatever.
Yeah,
A
I felt
lot of
like
opportunities.
it would help,
Yeah.
and I just enjoyed it. Like I
Yeah.
enjoyed knowing about the sort of legal underpinnings of foreign policy
Yeah.
and national security. Like even though I had already applied to the CIA,
Right.
I
Which are
knew,
ever changing, by the way, and to keep on
yeah,
top of all
yeah,
the different relationships, and countries are physically and and changing
yeah,
by name. And
yeah, exactly, and exactly foreign policy law. So that was it, and then I got a call from the agency and started not long after 9/11,
hmm.
uh, and I started in early 2002 and spent 6 years there.
So what were you hired to do?
I was a case officer, which
Uh-huh.
is a fancy word for a spy.
Yeah.
And so we were the ones who would go out and recruit sources.
Yeah.
And
Wow. Where
um,
were you stationed?
so I volunteered to go to Baghdad. This was late 2004 to late 2005. And they needed people. And I was young and single and stupid. And
Did you have the language skills?
no one really did. They were in such a hurry to get people out.
Huh.
So we had interpreters. Yeah.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
You're intensely curious, I think. That you
Oh,
feel like a very curious person. You're like, I want to see what that's like.
I did. I mean, I certainly wouldn't do it now. I have a son. He's
Right.
15.
Right.
No way
Sure.
I would do it with, I mean, I'm married and no way I would do it with a family.
Right.
But at the time it was kind of like, I mean, they were talking about forcing people to go. I mean, you remember this was after 9/11. There was such
Yeah.
a sense of urgency and peril and
And
um,
duty. Yeah.
duty and they, there was for the first time in the history of the CIA, they were talking about actually mandating that people go out there. It's a civilian organization, so you really can't force people the way you can in the military.
Yeah.
You're not going to get court-martialed or something
Right.
if you
Right.
go. You could maybe get fired, but
Right.
for the
But you
first
could
time,
also just quit. Like, I'm
you
not
could
going.
quit. Well,
Yeah.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
But that was the talk of the ultimatum. It was going to be, are we going to have to basically threaten people with, getting fired, or you're going to have to quit if you don't go to these war zones? And there were people who had families who were going to be faced with a difficult choice, and they needed people. So I was like, better someone like me who didn't have a family, and so I was originally slated to do, because of my background, I was in what they called then Central Europe Division, because I had worked and lived in the Balkans. Um, but so I basically moved from Central Europe Division to the Counterterrorist Center.
Okay.
And that's and volunteered,
Which
went to
I'm sure was very much all hands on deck.
oh, for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. But that was, I mean, when you join the CIA, you're pretty motivated, especially after 9/11.
Yeah.
And that was where I wanted to be, you know. I wanted to kind of
Yeah.
be in the fight. And I was a counterterrorist case officer. Our mission was to track down Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, who was the
Yeah.
leader of
Well, yeah.
Al-Qaeda in Iraq, if you
Yeah,
remember.
I do remember.
He was like the bin Laden in Iraq.
Right.
And so we failed miserably when I was there. And
Because I mean, this is coming from probably
yeah,
a place of very deep ignorance, but all of that comes, my understanding, less from technological capability in terms of the hunt and more from cultivating sources.
absolutely.
Cultivating sources who you can rely on, and most of the time you can't because they're doing it for the money.
100%. And also, I mean, this was new to the CIA. We were kind of just thrown into this war zone and we hadn't gotten our sea legs yet. And we were pretty much, we struggled to operate in a war zone. We were pretty much holed up in the green zone. We relied on people walking in to the green zone sources, as opposed to you couldn't go out. I mean, a typical case officer, you're going out, you're schmoozing people in a bar, in a restaurant, at a cocktail party. You're developing them. You're playing tennis with them. You're going on hikes with them. You're meeting them at a scientist conference, for
Right.
example.
Right.
You couldn't do any of that. You couldn't even drive in Baghdad without. I mean, we drove in armored vehicles. We were armored. You know, we wore body armor. We carried a weapon. So all
And
the
having somebody voluntarily walk into a green zone is such a suspect move anyway. Like, are they coming in to deceive us? Or what are the odds somebody's coming in purely like, I'm motivated to do this. I have information. I want the money. I can be trusted.
exactly like one in a million.
Yeah. Wow.
Exactly. So needless to say, I mean, our valuable sources were few and far between,
Yeah.
and we struggled to find Zarqawi, and it didn't happen until after I left, months after I left.
Yeah.
So
What was the impetus for you leaving country and then also leaving the CIA?
yeah, well, my tour was only a year, so that, I
Okay.
mean, you do a year and done. I mean, that was long. The military was deploying for 6 months at a time. Like a year was a long time
Yeah.
in the war zone. I mean, we were anyhow, long story, but basically, I it was quite traumatic for me. I came back, I had PTSD, and
Okay.
as does I think just about anyone who's been in a war zone.
And you must have, because one of the things I was thinking about asking earlier is the percent because you volunteered obviously for going there, but you also knew that it might be mandated anyway, and you kind of selflessly said, "I don't have a family, I can do this." Did the 1 year experience, as traumatic as it was, um, did it match kind of your expectations, or you're like, "Oh my God, this is far worse than I was expecting"?
Far worse than I was
Oh
expecting.
wow.
Yeah. And yeah, and I mean, I remember at the time I was calling my parents about once a week, and I was acutely aware of the disparity between like how the like what the news was able to capture and
Sure.
what was really going on. Like it was so much. I mean, because I knew it would be bad, and my parents would watch the news religiously, and they knew it was bad, and yet they
Yeah.
still didn't have an inkling of just how
Right.
bad it was.
And how stressful for them knowing that you're there.
Yeah. I mean, we had like suicide bombers inside the green zone, and I remember like the news never even reported, and why would they? Because they weren't there. It was chaotic. They didn't have access. You know, but one of the things we would do is, you know, sources couldn't, most Iraqis couldn't walk into the green zone on their own. We had to
Yeah.
escort them in. So we would have to meet them at these checkpoints to the green zone and escort them. And these were the popular targets for suicide bombers, were these checkpoints because they were bottlenecks.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was one of the most stressful things, was waiting for sources at these checkpoints, hoping that every vehicle that came by would
Wasn't
be
going to blow up. Yeah.
wasn't going to blow
Holy
up.
shit.
And we would work. We had a 2 officer rule. for safety reasons. And
Yeah.
so you go to all meetings with another case officer, and we would actually alternate waiting for sources just because we were like, you might as well. You
Why
have
risk both of us?
right, exactly.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So obviously PTSD makes sense. So you get back,
Yep.
you're going through all of that.
Yep.
I don't know whether treatment was available for
Not
you.
really. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. But I mean,
Um,
clearly it must have been identified because you, like you said, everyone's going through this. I mean, obviously, you know, the soldiers themselves, but case officers, anyone kind of working behind the scenes in the green zone, and then you're just kind of left to your own devices a little bit.
you're 100% left to your own devices. And it wasn't really
Huh.
recognized until years later. I
Oh,
mean, I
interesting.
remember I remember looking up the definition of PTSD because I was pretty sure something was going on. Like I was
Yeah.
having panic attacks. I didn't like crowds. I didn't like loud
Right. And
noises.
nothing that had been in your history prior to going
Oh,
there.
no, no, no,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
I mean, I pretty much knew I had
Right.
something,
Right.
but the definition at the time was you have to have witnessed a specific traumatic event.
Oh,
And, and I really hadn't. And at the time, I'm
no.
like, okay, I guess I'm good. You know, this too shall pass.
But it's
And
the pervasive fear and the
oh yeah,
pervasive dread. Psychologically, that's got to just tear you apart.
100%. I mean, now they completely know that's wrong, and
Right. Yeah.
it
It's
obviously
a,
it's cumulative. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly.
Right. Because it comes from obviously the old definition of shell shock, which is active combat. Right.
right, exactly.
But it's, yeah, I think you can have PTSD and have never been through
Been in
trauma.
combat, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I hear, and it's funny because in a lot of my I've learned actually so much in book talks from readers, like people who have been in war, people
Huh.
who have PTSD, who have been in, or former spies, for example, and I've actually been able to piece together a lot of my own experience from readers, but I've learned like social workers, like people who or like emergency doctors or emergency pediatricians, like they have PTSD,
Hmm.
you know, from just being exposed to other people's trauma, and I think it comes in all forms.
Yeah.
So
Wow. So
yeah,
you going through all of that
yeah,
is, are you still journaling at this point? Is it kind of, because now I would see that writing is can be highly therapeutic in a
yes,
situation like that.
yes. So yeah, so long story short, I actually started writing a memoir for just that reason.
Yeah, interesting. So not
Exactly.
necessarily I'm going to have this published, knowing what you would have to obviously go through in order to get something from your active time in the CIA published. I
Right.
know it obviously is done a
Yep.
lot, but it's a process.
Well, that is exactly what I did actually. So I spent years writing a memoir, not really knowing why, other than I wanted to make sense of my experiences, and
Right.
it was cathartic. Um, tried to get it, as you said, I had to get it cleared. Anything I write having to do with my time at the agency, fiction or nonfiction, I have to get
Sure.
cleared before I show it to anybody,
Right.
an agent or a publisher. So initially they redacted the shit out of it.
Yeah, because I assume because if you're writing it also kind of from a therapeutic side, you are really trying to document everything, I
I
would think.
was, and I was highly critical, to be honest,
Yeah,
of the
right.
agency. And this was at a time, I think it was a relative nadir for the agency. Like it was a time of chaos and transition post 9/11. The agency was quite insecure, quite heavy handed. And I'm saying that because I think it's evolved since then, but not at that time.
Yeah.
And they redacted the shit out of it. They redacted my height and weight. I kid you not. They redacted the color of the sky. Those are just two examples.
Oh,
Um,
yeah. So you're
I
like,
know.
okay, this is not even going to hew closely at all to what
Well,
I've written.
what I said was, screw you. It's not classified. I'm going to fight you on it, is what I said. I kind of made this a crusade.
Hmm.
Um, and, uh, and so I fought them on every single redaction. We're talking like 1,000 pages
And this is you as an individual or you with a
yes.
lawyer?
Well,
You with your legal background.
that's the thing. So good question, because when I left the CIA, I joined a small boutique law firm that practices national security law. One of the things we do is represent authors against the agency or against
Oh,
the national
perfect.
security. Exactly. I'm like, bring it.
Yeah.
Bring it, like, and I said, hey, look, I know this isn't classified. If you persist, I'm going to sue you. And I kept at it for years, and I won basically. I mean, they lifted almost all of the redactions. The irony in all of it was that at that point, this took years. I got to the end, and I realized I'm glad I have it. Maybe my son will read it someday, but this is not what I want to publish. And
So you didn't even self-publish it. It just,
it was too personal. It was not the story I want. I didn't, I'm too private a person, and I'm kind of an introvert, and it was not, I didn't feel comfortable putting my own story out there.
wow. But
So I
did it
went for,
achieve the goal of you look back now, I'm like, I needed to go not
yes.
only through the process of writing it, but go through the process of fighting for it
Yeah,
to get mentally to where you are now?
absolutely. I mean, I definitely think it helped me get through that transition,
Yeah.
from war to writer, from, where I am now. And I just want to say, I think, I was quite critical of the agency at the time. I was really at odds with them, but I now have a very good relationship with the agency, and I do think they have evolved immensely over the years.
Right.
We're talking, this was, 15 years ago. So kudos to the agency for having made progress.
And that process, because, and let's not discount the fact that you wrote a memoir, like you said, 1,000 pages, a lot of words. That's hard. Like, not only is it hard, because it's personal, it's just writing is hard. Obviously, you had a lot of
Yeah.
experience doing that, but you're trying to create a narrative that, even though it's personal and a recollection of what happened, you're still looking for that through line. You're still looking for that arc in a
Yeah,
way.
yeah,
So
yeah,
did that assist? So now you're like, now I have kind of the tools to write a novel.
for sure. I mean, I definitely think it helped train me as a writer. Also, I mean, I do think its primary purpose was catharsis and not writing,
Yeah.
in the sense of I would not have been proud of putting that memoir out there. It was not a work of literature that I wanted to put out there.
Yeah. I mean, memoirs really aren't
Yeah, well,
typically, but
some are. I don't know.
so some are. Yeah.
I read Bruce Springsteen's I really liked. I thought.
So
Yeah.
then at some point you're like, I'm going to write a novel. Now,
Yeah.
we're talking about the Peacock and the Sparrow,
Yeah.
which, and I want to just kind of say, for the listeners who don't know, it, is your debut novel, and it just fucking blew up. It blew up not only commercially, but probably even more so critically, right? In terms of the acclaim, the awards, the best of lists, and things like that, which is very
Thank you.
rare, right? For a debut novel. Was this your first novel?
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
God
other than
damn it.
like my failed attempts in like my Prague attic, that
Yeah. I mean, so that's really rare, right? For all of that to come together, and then to not only like get an agent and sell, but then to have the success that it's had. Um, Clearly, I think, and I've evidenced this over 20 years, talking to thriller writers and going to Thriller Fest and knowing people who write within the world that you write. Those people who have that experience in their real life and have those deep wells of empathy where they can fictionalize something that is very near and dear to them and capture that emotion. Those tend to do very, like, I've seen it, those tend to do very well because you have the authority, and then you also have the empathy combined.
well, thank you for saying that. And I mean, I feel totally grateful to have gotten, the accolades I've gotten. I mean, I honestly was felt euphoric just to get a publishing deal. So
Right. And it's a whole new world to you. I know what that feels like where you're like, I don't even know, is this good? Is this not good? And you have
exactly.
to have people tell you.
Well, that and I had written this novel in a vacuum because I couldn't show it to anyone until it was cleared. So I literally spent 5 years writing this. I couldn't even show it to my husband, who has a clearance and I don't. But I couldn't even show it. Like I had no one to say, "Yeah, this is pretty good," or "No, this sucks." And
Right.
so it was like a total leap of faith for me. Like I was like,
Wow.
I could have just wasted 5 years of my life and written the worst shit ever. Um, which I thought, maybe I did. But so it was, I mean, I was just euphoric to get a publishing deal, and everything on top of that has just been like beyond beyond my hopes.
And
So
it's a weird situation to be in, and I'm just projecting here because my path was decidedly different than yours in terms of novels not selling, and then just it's a decade before even anyone pays it, whatever. But having talked to enough people, it's hard because there's no straight line path in this world.
yeah,
And I know plenty of people who had massive success and it's really tough to follow it up. Other people, their next one was even bigger, but you have no idea. Really, unless it's like a really popular first book of a series, what the next one's going to do. Are you
exactly.
feeling that right now?
Oh my God, like in spades. Like I can't even tell you. This has been just the bane of my existence for the last year.
Yeah.
It's book number two. And I mean, I'm
Did
curious
you
to
sign for two books with the publisher?
I didn't. I signed for one, and then last summer, a little over a year ago, they came to me and bought my
They're
book.
like, yeah, can you do this again, please? Because this is great.
Yeah, which I mean, it's like a dream, right? I mean, I
Yeah.
couldn't. I feel elated, and I was just so honored. But I do. To be honest, I'm feeling the pressure. I feel like you don't have any the first time around. You don't have any expectations. You don't have any constraints. And this time around, I do. And so
Well,
I
and
don't know what your experience was.
and I don't know what your next one's about, but I could see because you have such an interesting story and because your first book did well and it was within the world of the CIA, specifically a CIA spy, I could see where they're like, yeah, do this again, which A has to adhere to what you want to do, and B, does that not necessitate having to go through that whole approval process again with the agency?
Oh, it does. I mean, everything you're saying, yes. Yes, I'm writing another spy novel, and I do have to have it approved again, which is actually like the least onerous
Yeah.
part of this at this
But
point.
it's time consuming, and I
I'm
could see that being frustrating.
Yeah, although again, that's not it's not a huge part. They were actually, to my point about the CIA improving over the years. When
Hmm.
I submitted Peacock, the Peacock and the Sparrow, it was actually a breeze. I mean, it was a couple months with minimal redactions.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we're talking like a couple words, and
Okay. Are you
um,
limited? I'm just curious from an editorial standpoint.
yeah.
That has to be almost at the arc phase that's going through because I would think that after it gets approved by the CIA, what if you're like, oh, I want to add a few things
No,
in?
exactly. So no, you're literally not supposed to show it literally to anyone until it gets approved.
Oh,
I mean,
so not even your agent or your
correct.
editor.
I'm not exaggerating. Like you literally cannot show it to anyone. Now, whether everyone abides by that, that's another story, but I'm pretty fastidious about it. I literally don't show it to anyone
And what are the,
until
just out of curiosity,
yeah.
what are the repercussions? Are they criminal repercussions or are they,
It could
yeah,
be in
yeah,
theory. I mean, if the criminal standard is classified information. If they
yeah,
can
yeah,
prove
yeah.
that you've shown someone classified information, you could be prosecuted.
Right.
More likely, if the civil repercussion consequences based on your secrecy agreement, if that's easy to prove that you violated. If you
Right.
show
You
someone
get sued, your publisher gets sued.
yeah, and you forfeit all royalties, everything. And that's
Oh,
happened.
wow.
They've gone after, there was a guy, his pseudonym was Ishmael Jones, and he did not comply with the approval process. He wrote a book called The Human Factor, and they won. It's an easy thing to prove, not the criminal case, but the civil case, because all they have to show is the piece of paper you signed. And if you didn't submit it, you're in violation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Funny note, I did one time ask them to show me the secrecy agreement I'd signed and they could not show me, but that's
Oh,
that's another
wow.
story.
Because it was a secret or because they lost it?
No, I think they lost it.
Wow. Wow.
um,
So
but
now you're in this world of writing. This is this weird, this thing that you've been thinking about all your life and have been kind of dancing around. And it's like, this is what I do now.
yeah, it's a dream. I mean, I much prefer writing about spying to doing it.
Right.
It was never an easy fit, and I love writing about it. So
That's
yeah.
so fast. And then you also have to think about, because we all get at, I think, especially as thriller writers, we do get kind of, I don't know if pigeonhole is the right word, but there are reader expectations, right?
Oh, for sure.
Tom Clancy's not writing a romance
Right.
that's going to sell. Um, you know, John Grisham, for example, has done different stuff and it's been great. But I feel in from my perspective of like, no, this pacing is what you're known for.
Yeah.
So if you want to stretch your legs a little bit, I don't know how much that works for us.
Right.
Although that's what I love to do anyway. So it's
Is it?
it's not it is. And I'm always finding ways to even push that boundary of like, how do you pace something where it becomes just not even a reading experience where it just becomes
Yeah.
almost like you're absorbing it through osmosis because it's 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 easy but it's also emotional and impactful. I find that fascinating, like that kind, because I think that's where the reading world is headed in
Yeah.
terms of which is funny because I almost always read nonfiction,
Do you?
which is much more dense, and I just like to get lost in it. Um, but I love to write, one word sentences,
Uh-huh.
3 word paragraphs. I like to just kind of the stream of consciousness, like make it almost cinematic. And I think that's how people are reading things now. They're like, they just want to get pulled in. And the patience level, I mean, I think it's expectations. I think if they know it's going to be a spy novel, there's going to be stuff that they're going to have to absorb. They're going to have to absorb procedure protocol that they don't know, and they're going to have the patience for that. If they're just reading, a psychological thriller told from an everyday person's single person, first person present tense perspective, I think they just want to experience as if it were them.
Yeah.
And that's usually, in my mind, very staccato burst sentences, stream of consciousness, your own thoughts realized on the page.
Yeah.
How do you recreate that? And that's kind of where I feel like I'm living a little bit, and
Uh-huh.
it's fascinating, but it's also challenging.
Is that can I ask what you're working on now or next?
Yeah, so my next book comes out next November, and it's it takes place in 5 hours. It's
Oh.
basically 2 days before Christmas, and it's a home invasion gone wrong. They've
Uh-huh.
gotten the wrong house, and this woman they find in the house has been waiting for somebody to come in and to find her because she's hiding in the mountains, but it's the wrong people. And
Oh.
and there's a snowstorm, so it's very claustrophobic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Nobody can leave. Um, and it just flew right out of me as
That's
I'm writing
amazing.
this thing.
Really? Oh my God.
Yeah,
So
because
jealous.
I'm just visualizing it all. But what I'm writing actually right now, the second book that I just signed, is a little bit like, I don't want to say slower, but it's a little bit more conspiracy theory. It's a little bit more involved. And I'm 30,000 words in, and I'm like, I need to go back and rewrite these 30,000 words because this doesn't have the propulsion
Hmm.
that I want. And I think that is kind of becoming expected of me because you get to the point where you're like, I can hear my editor's voice. I can hear my
Yeah.
editor saying, we need to get to this faster. We need to, we need to see more anger or whatever it is, or my agent's
Yeah.
voice. Um, and I have to decide, am I trying to please them or am I trying to please myself?
Yes.
And hopefully you marry the two, which is
Yeah.
the space that I mostly live in, but sometimes it doesn't work.
I 100% relate to this. I mean, I feel like, so my spy novel, I think, is unusual in that it is not, it's much slower than a typical spy novel. And I think part of the challenge initially when my book came out was finding the right readers, because there are plenty of people who want just the action spy novels, like the
Yeah.
roof scaling and car chase scenes. And my book is not that at all.
Yeah.
And it's much more psychological, and it's not for everyone, you know. And I think it's a kind of narrow lane, but I'm finding the same thing that you're describing in my second novel. I feel like your second novel kind of defines who you are as a writer, because you know your first novel could be a one-off, whatever, you know, it's just there's one data point. And I feel like your second novel, then you start to feel like, okay, there's a pattern, you know, like this is who I am as a writer. and
Yeah.
and for me, I'm realizing I don't write. I'm not going to write fast paced. Like
Yeah.
there's a voice in my head saying, no, you need to. It's just like you're saying, you need to make it faster. You need to get to the action. And I'm struggling with it because I don't think I'm that kind of writer.
Well, and I don't think everyone needs to be that kind of writer. I think it's what you're known for. I think for you, you got attention on your first one. So you're at a place where I probably wasn't until my fifth novel, which was my eighth written book. And I can look back on it now. And my fifth novel, I always say, is where I found my voice. I can see my voice come out then. And I needed to write eight books before that happened. Um, but you know, my first four got some attention, but not a
Yeah,
lot. So it's like it was a little bit easier to be like play around and discover different things. I would say I was much darker, you know, in terms of actual acts of violence in my
uh-huh.
first few books, because that was kind of how I thought my mind was going to work. And I realized like, no, I much prefer just this pervasive threat of
Yeah,
doom. So when the doom actually happens, it's visceral and it's impactful, but it's not throughout. So you're not getting, you know, sick of it or immune to it.
right. Exactly.
That's much more interesting to me than
Agree. Yeah.
nonstop action or nonstop, you know. And same with spy novels. I think about like a show like The Agency, um, which is pretty cerebral and fairly difficult to can be fairly difficult to follow because everyone's speaking in their very pure language to each other without giving a nod to the camera or an explanation, which is great. I prefer that. And the action is small, but when it happens, you feel it. And but
Yeah.
I just love it's atmospheric, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what's enticing to me rather than the cliche James Bond where there's bullets flying in every scene and nobody's getting hit by the bad guys. To me, that's the most boring thing in the world.
I agree. I mean, I look, you're preaching to the choir. I agree, but you know, there's still a big readership that I would say the majority of readers that go for the, you know, high octane.
Yeah, well, clearly you found your audience. I
I
mean,
did. I did.
and because you know, I look at your success, and it's not just critical success; it's a lot of reviews. There's a lot of books being sold,
Oh,
and if that's the barometer you're going for, which is always the barometer I'm going for,
yeah.
you know, I love critical success as well, but I'd rather sell books.
No,
I'd
totally. I
rather
mean,
have an audience,
yeah,
and
no,
you've found yours clearly.
I did. I did.
So.
I feel very lucky for that, for sure.
Well, we're going to wrap up. We've actually gone long. I could talk to you forever, by the way. Just
Same. Same.
so I hope we get to connect in person. You
Me
know,
too.
I'm sure next year. Before we wrap up, we're going to do our storytelling. So this
Oh
is
my God, I'm so nervous about this.
you shouldn't be.
I'm supposed to be
Um,
nervous about. I'm so bad at this.
I usually have three books sitting next to me that I've randomly chosen and I forgot. So I'm just going to pick a book that is physically near me,
Okay.
and I've got my friend Wendy Walker's Arc
Oh, I know her. I met her at
for Blade.
I
She's lovely.
yeah, she's lovely. I met
She's
her at Thriller Fest.
She is a great
Oh
person.
my God, I'm so nervous about this.
Yeah,
I'm like not good at thinking on my feet, even though I used to be a spy.
well, I think you'll be surprised. Most people do just fine, and when it's terrible, that's kind of even more fun.
Okay.
So, because I'm not great at it either. So I've got Wendy Walker's
All
Blade.
right.
I am going to you give me a number between 1 and 285.
Okay, 78.
And all I'm going to do is scan page 78. I'm going to look at it, find a sentence that we might start with.
Okay.
I'm, I'm sorry, I'm looking at a sentence right now. I'm going to read that sentence. That's the first sentence and maybe a 2 minute long short story. So I'll read that sentence. You give
Okay.
me a sentence or two, whatever comes to your mind. I'll do a sentence or
Okay.
two, and then I'll call it when it just totally goes off the rails.
Okay.
Um, I'm going to read this and you do whatever you want with this.
Oh my God. Okay.
She stood there in her bra and underwear, lean muscle head to toe, one arm braced against the wall.
Okay. Um, the footsteps were getting closer in the hallway outside the door.
It was 3 in the morning, way too late for people to be coming home. And when the footsteps stopped at her door and she saw the shadow from the corridor light fill by her feet, she knew whoever it was, they were there for her.
The knock still startled her, and the voice was not what she expected when he asked, um, I don't know, when he asked, why did you call?
There was an accent in his words, one that was vaguely familiar, but not instantly recognizable. She hadn't called anybody. She reached into the hallway closet where a baseball bat always sat home, never once used to hit a ball, but always thought to be her only source of protection. She didn't care how she was dressed. She was not going to let this man burst his way in. So she decided to open the door.
When she opened the door, there was no one. She stepped out into the hallway, turned to both sides, saw the stairwell door close. Now was her chance.
I think we call it there. That was great. Talk about
I'm
building
sorry. I
suspense.
told you I would be bad.
No, no, I thought that was great. I kind of picture I kind of picture her going back inside and somebody's already there somehow, but I don't know quite how that would work.
I
Um,
was going to send her down to chase the guy down the stairwell.
you did great.
Oh, sorry.
So will I see you at Thriller Fest?
I'm not sure about Thriller Fest. Are you going to
Yeah,
Thriller
I work with the debuts.
Oh, okay.
So I'm on that committee, so I'll be there, and I work with Query Fest as well.
Okay.
I'll be there. I'll probably be at BoucherCon. Um,
I'll be at BoucherCon for sure.
yeah, because that's right before my next one comes out.
Awesome.
So when can we expect the next book?
So my deadline is end of year, and I think it's tentatively scheduled for next fall publication, but
Okay.
I think that's to be determined.
Okay. Well, very exciting. I'm excited for it, and
Oh, thank
yeah,
you.
what a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so
So,
much fun.
all right, take care, Alana.
Thanks. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, that is it. That is my conversation with I.S. Berry, and I thought she did great at the storytelling. It's funny. Everyone's worried about the storytelling, and totally get it. I would be too. Um, and I think everyone always does great. Everyone does much better than they always think that they do. And people like a lot of don't give themselves enough credit because I thought she did a fantastic job. I wanted to see where that was going to go. Um, so please check out her book, The Peacock and the Sparrow. As she noted in our conversation, her next book will be out most likely fall of 2026. But you can keep track of her and her work at isberry.net. And you can pop on over to carterwilson.com and check out my books, my newsletter, other episodes of this show, and all that good stuff. And you can head on over to unboundwriter.com if writing coaching is something that might be of interest to you. All right, friends. Thanks as always for watching and listening. This takes care of this episode. As always, another one out just next week. In the meantime, take care.